Hi movie fans, this time we will be looking at the 1970s Oscar-winning Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, an Italian psychological black-humored satire on corruption in high office. Check it out and see what happens when a chief homicide detective kills his mistress and deliberately leaves clues to prove his guilt for the crime. That takes some balls. Leave a comment and we will randomly pick one to give a shout out on a future video. Let's do this. Highly regarded police homicide inspector known as the Doctor, Dottore, visits his mistress Augusta Terzi. She jokes with him about how he is going to kill her this time, to which he answers by cutting your throat. They are soon under the black silk sheets having sexy fun time until he does actually slit her throat. He is covered with her blood and makes his way to the shower to wash off. After he is showered, he retrieves the razor blade that he used and plants his fingerprints on a bottle and glass. Once he is dressed, he steals some of Augusta's jewelry, but makes sure his prints are not left in this location. He then carefully makes sure that the thread from his tie is left under Augusta's fingernail and rubs one of his shoes on the bloody carpet to leave a trace as he walks through the apartment. He then calls the police and reports a crime at that location. He swipes a couple of bottles of champers from the fridge and leaves. On the way out, he runs into tenant Antonio Pace, and they drop a few pregos at the gate before moving on. He arrives at police headquarters and is greeted as a bit of a hero. He tells some officers to get 15 glasses for the champagne. Brigadier Belia then approaches him and tells him about the murder at Augusta Terzi's apartment. He has a bit of a go at the detective for being sloppy and then orders him to go to the crime scene. Dottore comes out of his office being loud and says that he will be gone soon. They start handing out the champagne amongst themselves and force some on a suspect that they are interrogating for the murder of a woman. His replacement, Inspector Mangani, congratulates him on his promotion to the political division and hopes his success continues. Dottore then abruptly halts the celebration and orders the detectives to get over to the murder scene. When Dottore arrives at the location, the press are already there. He tells Patton, his confidant reporter, that he suspects the husband. In the apartment, the police officers have found newspaper clippings of various crimes, and there is a picture of Dottore. He looks at the body briefly, then Belia tells him jewelry has been taken but cash was left and that they cannot find any underwear in the house, saying she was a libertine. He orders them to take the bottle and glass as evidence and ask who the neighbors are. He's told the neighbor is a surgeon and is above suspicion, whatever that means. She has been separated from her husband for 3 years, so he tells them to bring the husband in for questioning. The detectives have found pictures of Augusta pretending to be the victims at various crime scenes. There is a flashback of Dottore getting her to pose for the weird photos and setting them up as crimes that he has worked on. It's all a bit strange, but they seem to be having fun. As Dottore is walking around the apartment, Belia tells him how he thinks they are dealing with an idiot with the careless things that he has done, which should make it easy to catch the killer. Dottore agrees. Dottore is about to leave when he decides to go up the staircase. He notices the neighbor, Antonio Pace, whom he bumped into when he left Augusta's apartment that morning. Antonio does not see him, so he heads outside to be inundated by the press. He talks with Patton again and gives him some lurid details and asks him to focus his story on the husband, then drives off in his lovely Alfa Romeo. He drives to his apartment block where he hides the jewels and relives the moment that Augusta anonymously first called and flirted with him, challenging him to find out who she is. She calls him many times with stories about how her home had been broken into and she is about to be raped, stories about how she admires the police, and it is all a bit of a turn-on for her. He eventually tracks her down and goes into her apartment and straight up tells her he doesn't pay for his women. Like any policeman, he snoops around the apartment and asks her what her game is. She tells him she is having a bit of fun. The next day at work, Dottore, now inspector of the political division, holds an American-style meeting in the parking garage and proceeds to give a fiery speech, listing all the criminality that is going on and how it is affecting the social order. He says it is our duty to repress the citizens, repression is our vaccine, repression is civilization, and they stand to give him a round of applause. He is then shown the police archives by Keynes, where the files on the communists, partisans, Trotskyites, Maoists, anarchists, and various Catholic movements are kept. All the data is being entered into a new computerized database. Dottore says he wants to pretend Augusta's murder was political and runs the address through the computer to see what it returns. Antonio Pace is in the system as a subversive, hot-blooded, and dangerous fanatic. His phone has been tapped for the last 2 years. Dottore then says that he will put him away. Later, he has a meeting with the police commissioner and starts telling him the country is in trouble and that he needs 100 more men and more money to pay informants to get the job done. The commissioner agrees when he says he wants to get some apartments for his informants, but he says that as far as anyone is concerned, he knows nothing about it. When he says they want to tap another 630 phones, the commissioner clears that too. He then goes on to say that he was seeing Augusta Terzi. The police chief just wants to know how it was, adding she was a beautiful woman. Dottore asks if he should inform the investigators, but the commissioner just says ciao. Nicola Panunzio from Homicide is called to Dottore's office where he is presented with his file. He says that his cousin is a commie, but that he has nothing to do with him and begs to not get transferred. Dottore asks about the case and Panunzio says they found the thread that he planted under her nail and are currently interrogating the husband. When asked about fingerprints, Panunzio says the only ones they found were his and they were everywhere, but Panunzio makes all kinds of excuses for him. Dottore then goes to sit in on the interrogation of Augusta Terzi's husband, where they are asking when he became a homosexual, was it before or after he split up with Augusta? They keep browbeating him for being gay and saying that was his motive for killing his wife. He asks for a lawyer and the police say this is not America. When the law changes, you'll get a lawyer. Dottore goes into the observation room and remembers the time Augusta asked him to interrogate her. He obliges her and gives her a little bit of the third degree, then explains the psychology behind interrogation and explores his position of power. Back in the interrogation room, the officers give the husband some space, but Dottore takes over the interrogation. The husband tells Dottore he was being blackmailed by Augusta and her lover. He says that the man, who sounded like a military type, threatened to put him on file as a transvestite, and he thinks this man also killed Augusta, who was attracted to powerful men. Dottore shakes his hand and says it will be okay. He tells the rest of the police he thinks he is innocent while making fun of him being gay. At his home, Dottore records a confession saying that he murdered Augusta and deliberately left plenty of clues at the crime scene. He said he did this not to sidetrack the investigation, but to prove that he, as a powerful man, was above suspicion. He goes on to say, however, that if an innocent person goes to prison instead, it will not be proven that he is above suspicion. That night, Dottore goes to a post office and mails a package to the police headquarters. He then phones Patton the reporter. Poorly disguising his voice, he tells him his phone is tapped and that Augusta's jewels, the killer's shoe, and the razor have all been mailed to the police, and says that this definitively exonerates the husband. Patton says that he recognizes his voice before he hangs up. In Dottore's next meeting, he is told they have removed thousands of communist graffiti over the years and the statistics about how the quantity for Mao, Stalin, Ho Chi Minh, Togliatti, and others' graffiti have fluctuated in the future projections of graffiti. Dottore sees Pace through the window and has a rant about the communist youth movement and says they need to infiltrate them in the schools, using their children if they have to. Dottore is informed that Antonio Pace is being questioned at Police HQ by Mangani. He heads to the wiretapping area at HQ and requests to hear the recordings of Pace's phone conversations. He hears Pace tell a friend that he was questioned about the murder, but he is not a suspect. He tells him he said nothing to the police. His friend spills the beans that he has slept with Augusta, which surprises Dottore. Pace tells him to shut up, knowing that his phone is tapped, and then speaks directly to the police, tapping his phone saying, "If you don't join us, at least ask for a pay rise." The wiretapping supervisor says getting a pay rise is not such a bad idea, but Dottore gets pissed and says he will report him, which ends that conversation. Dottore then finds Belia and Mangani listening to the recording of Pace's call to Patton when he told him about the package to exonerate the husband. Belia says the story came out 1 hour before the package arrived at Police HQ and the husband was in custody, so he could not have sent it. Mangani says he could have had an accomplice and says he will keep the husband in jail. Dottore says the husband is innocent and calls Mangani a bureaucrat who is afraid of public opinion. Outside, Belia is seething and says Mangani is a reactionary. Dottore tells him he won't last and not to worry. Dottore is then visited by Patton, who says he knows it was him that phoned and Mangani is asking who it was. Dottore starts yelling at him and says it wasn't him and adds that he does him favors and he should be careful. When Patton leaves, Bedia is back and says they can prove the husband is innocent if they can find the man with the blue tie that the thread came from, the same tie that he was wearing the night of the murder. He says the man who sold the tie to Dottore sold two of them. Bedia rules out Dottore's tie and says the other one was sold to a woman, Augusta Terzi. Bedia says she gave the tie to the person that killed her. Dottore says that he can go to his place and ask the maid to get his blue tie if he wants. Bedia can't believe his ears and asks a couple of times if it is really okay. At some point, Dottore heads to a shop in town and approaches a random man and asks him to buy all the blue ties in a shop, saying that he works in the theater. When the man returns with 25 ties, Dottore tells him that he only wants one and he can keep the rest. Then, when questioned, he orders him to take the remaining ties to the homicide division and confesses that he is a murderer. He tells the man to get a really good description of him so he can tell the police, making sure that he gets all of his details right, the time and place, etc. Once he is back in his car, he puts on the new blue tie. He drives home to be met by his cleaner, who says that Belia came by to collect his tie, but she says she did not allow him to have it. Dottore says, "How could you have given it to him when I am wearing it?" She says, "You must have two then." She says that he also wanted to look at his shoes and asked if he had women over or if he has a girlfriend and what he does on Sundays. Dottore then finds the original blue tie and cuts it into pieces and flushes it down the toilet. He visits the homicide division and takes the new blue tie to Mangani and Belia, saying that it will save them some time. There are 24 other blue ties on the desk, and the man that bought the ties is in the office talking with the officers. Dottore leaves, but Mangani asks him to come back and meet the man, who then tells him the story about being asked to buy the ties, but is too scared to point the finger at Dottore. Dottore takes Mangani into the hallway and starts reaming him so the whole office can hear. Mangani apologizes and says that he will hold the man and interrogate him. Dottore then goes back to his office and records a conversation with the police commissioner, asking if he authorized him to be investigated as a suspect in the murder case. The commissioner says they can talk about it over dinner, but Dottore flips out and says that he has dirt on everyone and can blow up their entire system. He then goes to the wiretapping supervisor to ask for some recordings, but the commissioner has already given orders for nothing to be released. He starts asking the supervisor to bend the rules for him, but the supervisor is having none of it when, out of the blue, an explosion goes off in the police station. Dottore runs to the area and meets the commissioner when he arrives shortly after and is told of two other explosions that have gone off simultaneously in other locations. Dottore says they need to act fast and they know who the people are. The commissioner gives them carte blanche to bring in whoever they like. The police round up a number of suspects and bring them to the police station, where Antonio Pace recognizes Dottore before being moved along. Dottore goes outside and thinks back to the time that Augusta wanted to split from him and how she was seeing Antonio the revolutionary, which infuriated him, as he says he represents state power and should be respected. She starts calling him a child and an incompetent lover while throwing things at him and giving him some harsh truths. Back at the police station, the detainees have started splitting into factions, which pleases the police as they will be harder to deal with if they are united. Dottore says that he wants to see Antonio Pace. He says that he has had training and is a leader, but first he wants to interrogate the man next to him. They interrogate him using stress positions and make him drink salted water. Dottore eventually gets it out of the man that Pace made the bomb and planted it when he visited the police station for his interview. He releases the comrade and then prepares to interrogate the man that can place him at the scene of Augusta Terzi's murder. Antonio says he is a former chemistry student and an independent anarchist, adding that he recognizes Dottore as the lover of Augusta, his neighbor. He tells Dottore that he thinks he murdered Augusta. Dottore tells him to turn him in and keeps telling him to the point of begging, but Pace knows he can use this as leverage against the system and just leaves. Dottore tells the police to let him go. Dottore says that "you are mine now," and writes a letter, which he takes to the homicide division. He finds a room of people to be questioned and makes his way to the front of the line and enters the room and confronts Mangani and says, "You'll never understand the full significance of my actions, of my sacrifice with which I hope to reaffirm, in all its purity, the concept of authority. When you wish to interrogate me, you'll find me at home." He then walks out with contempt written all over his face. Once he is back at home, it's not long before he sees Belia arrive. He then quotes some article of law, which states, when the circumstances of the crime and the high moral character of the prisoner so allow, the prosecutor or the judge may make the following justifiable decree. Instead of being incarcerated in prison, the prisoner may remain temporarily under arrest in his own home. He takes a nap only to be woken by Belia, who says the others are in the adjacent room, where he finds the police commissioner and other senior officers. They put salt in his mouth and Mangani starts to interrogate him as to his whereabouts on the evening of the murder. Dottore tells them he killed her and Pace witnessed him being there, but Mangani says Pace has a watertight alibi and was not in Rome that day. Dottore tells them the bloody footprint was made by him, but they say there are thousands of shoes like that, so he tells them about the fingerprints he left, but they argue against this and any evidence of his guilt. They will not accept his proof, and when he shows them the photos he took of her in his apartment, they rip them up. He starts pleading while the officers take drinks from a set table and Belia and Panunzio start to hit him with things. They are annoyed that he is not being a team player. Eventually, he claims his innocence, so they make him sign a blank paper and leave. He says there is still someone who knows the facts that can be used against all of them. The commissioner says, "That's a score that we will have to settle." He wakes up and realizes he just dreamed that whole encounter. He looks outside and sees the senior officers are now just arriving at his house. He invites them in, and you will have to guess what happens, as that is the end of the movie, except for this paragraph from Kafka. No matter what impression he makes on us, he is a servant of the law. Therefore, he belongs to the law and does not answer to human judgment. Let us know in the comments what you think happens. Is he above the law? Did he murder her to murder her, or to prove some people are above the law? Thanks for watching. Peace out.